Hey guys, I'm currently reading Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, and I'm not done with it, I'm almost done, but I just had to gush over Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky poem. So this is the first stanza of the poem. "'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe, all mimsy were the borogoves, and the momraths outgrabe." And then the poem goes on to talk about the monster called the Jabberwocky and how it gets slain. And then it ends with that same stanza that I just read to you. In my edition of the book, which is a Barnes & Noble classic, there's a note on the text and it says that Lewis Carroll originally published that first stanza on its own, and he published it under the title A Stanza of Anglo-Saxon Poetry. And then he listed meaning of all the words in it. And then he had a translation for it. So according to Lewis Carroll, this is what that first stanza means after all of his definitions. "It was evening, and the smooth, active badgers were scratching and boring holes in the hillside. All unhappy were the parrots, and the grave turtles squeaked out." So I don't know if you realize what he just did, but he took that stanza that he wrote with all these made-up words, defined these made-up words, and then he published it and said, this is a bit of Anglo-Saxon poetry. A bit of ancient Anglo-Saxon poetry. And I think it's hysterical. He found this bit of poetry from a long lost time, and here's what this poem means, when in reality he wrote it and he made up all the words in it, and it's a nonsense poem. And then later he published it in Through the Looking Glass with the rest of the Jabberwocky poem. And I just think it is so funny, like, it is so amusing that this guy just made up words and made a poem and published this poem and said that it was ancient poetry from medieval times, essentially, and tried to pass it off before he finally published it in here and was like, oh yeah, it's really mine. I just find that very amusing. It's actually quite genius when you think about it. And his definitions sound legit. So for example, he says outgrabe is the past tense of the verb to outgribe. It is connected with the old verb to grike or shrike, from which are derived shriek and creak, meaning squeaked. That's just hilarious. He made up a word and defined it in a way that if you didn't know that that was a made-up word, you might believe it. Because it sounds like he knows what he's talking about, when he really just made it all up. He's just pulling stuff out of his butt. It just makes me smile every time. I just love this poem. I'm really enjoying this book and I can't wait to finish it. So, thanks for letting me gush about the Jabberwocky, and if you haven't read it, you should go check it out because it's just so amusing and adorable and hilarious, and it's just a work of art and genius on Lewis Carroll's part. Thanks for letting me geek out, and thanks for talking books with me. Let me know if you've read the poem and what you thought, and if you knew how he had originally published it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments.